I interviewed 3 former CIA operatives. These men have spent their careers hunting down the most dangerous terrorists in the world.
This is a war that will be fought on the basis of solid intelligence.
What's happening in Iran right now is that you saw a war that was led by the United States and Israel.
We may have casualties.
Today, they'll talk about Iran, intelligence gathering techniques, and undercover operations.
The top terrorist in Iran, I call him.
They answer the one question on everybody's mind. Do you think this is the beginning of World War III? Talk to us a little bit about why you think, what's going on in Iran is going on, and more importantly, do you think the CIA had a role to play in pushing the first domino, so to speak?
What's happening in Iran right now is that you saw a war that was led by the United States and Israel, in which to remove the regime, to take out the leadership. And in the first 24 hours, they were surprisingly and largely successful in taking out the top leadership. That really was a surprise to everyone. But that goes into the intelligence that was collected prior to the strike. And it is the intelligence is what dictated when a strike would take place. We have sources that are human, which is human intelligence, as well as SIGINT, that signals intelligence, collected by both countries. We had people on the ground, as well as intercept information that indicated that the leadership in Iran was going to meet. That was the time if we were going to take action. So we're able to follow traffic patterns, cameras that are, will indicate to us when there's a convoy, when there's a VIP moving through town. So over months, this is what that took. The analytics of that data showed us that there was a major meeting, the same vehicles that transport Ayatollah Khamenei, as well as top leadership, entering the compound. We also had embedded some devices within the palace, within the government compound, that we had real-time confirmation that he was there. Some of these things I can't get into the details, but it could be voice ID as well as facial ID technology.
I think the reaction and response you're seeing by our Gulf nation partners is also very telling in terms of the intelligence and diplomatic cooperation we're seeing on the ground there. And to answer your question, I think the CIA was very crucial in preparing the administration for this operation, certainly giving them the intelligence that they needed to feel like they have a high degree of confidence that this operation is timed right and is going to be a success.
Yeah, so intelligence played a big role in this. I mean, and we see that borne out by the fact that the stock of the CIA director, John Radcliffe, has risen with the administration. And I think in the beginning, Donald Trump is not a big believer in the CIA, right? He views that a little skeptically as part of the deep state. But the CIA has performed well. I mean, with the Venezuela operation to remove Maduro, that was an intelligence-based operation, right? And now you look at the removal of the supreme leader, right, in the very opening gambit, a daring daytime bombing raid in Iran. That was based on intelligence. So the role of intelligence with the CIA and with the very competent Israelis has shown that this is a war that will be fought on the basis of solid intelligence. As a CIA officer, the odds of me being inside Iran would be very slim, right? This is an offshore operation for agencies like the CIA. It's an offshore operation for Mossad, right? Even Mossad agents. I know we all like to watch television shows like Tehran and the like that portray Mossad agents slinking around the streets of Tehran, but that's simply not really the case. There may be a few intelligence officers operating internally, but it's very risky, and the payoff can be not worth the risk. The trick is to recruit surrogates. It's to, the task for the agency or Mossad will be to recruit people from the Iranian population, whether it's Persians, Kurds, Azeris, other ethnic groups, Arab ethnic groups, right? Well, the task will be to find these people to somehow be able to reach into Iran, make contact with them, recruit them, task them, run them, right? And then collect the intelligence. So it's mostly an offshore operation. It will rely heavily on modern day data technology. And then, of course, the Iranians will be on the lookout for that stuff. So it will be a very dangerous cat and mouse game between what's left of the counterintelligence establishment in Iran and what resources the CIA, the Mossad, and other agencies are willing to put into the collection.
If you were operating out of Iran right now,
Yeah.
and you were a CIA officer, or you were operating in its bordering countries, can you give us some specific examples of the techniques that the CIA would be using to their advantage to gather intelligence?
I think some very practical things that I would be looking at right now if I'm in the CIA, and this is a true story that happened when I was in Baghdad, when I was in Iraq, is trying to map out who are the opposition, who is the leadership, and trying to figure out a way to get locals to resolve their own issues. And here's a real life example. I was in Baghdad when the war was raging between nationalist insurgents, Al-Qaeda, ISIS was just being formed, and you have the Shia militias. When we mapped out the opposition or the leadership, well, we found out that there's one major insurgent group in Iraq. It was a Sunni insurgent group. They were the largest terrorist organization after Al-Qaeda. I mean, these guys were causing massive death. We had a directive from the President of the United States. We need to stop the violence. We need to stop the cycle of violence. So I suggested in a meeting, I was a junior case officer in Baghdad. I said, why don't we reach out to the leadership? They're like, what are you talking about? I said, why don't we call them? They're like, so you're going to call a terrorist? What are you going to say? Let's sit together. Let's have some tea and some biscuits and let's talk this over. I said, yes, I'd like to talk to him. I'm a native Arabic speaker. We had the numbers. Of course, we had the phone numbers. We're monitoring these terrorists. Essentially, my colleagues laughed at me and they said, okay, it is your reputation, but also we have nothing else to lose. Call him. So the top leader, the top terrorist in Iraq, he's in a neighboring country. I call him. I said, Assalamu alaikum. I greeted him. I said, peace be upon you. I said, sir, I know who you are. He's like, wait, who are you? Why are you calling me? I said, I gave an alias name. And I said, I'm calling from the American embassy and I would like to talk to you about a ceasefire, about laying down your arms. He's like, he was very confused that some American called him. And sure enough, he hangs up on me. And of course, he destroys his SIM cards. He throws away his phones. And the CIA said, see, this is what we expected. This will never work. 2 weeks later, our targeting officers in the CIA were able to reacquire new phone numbers that he was using. I call him again. I said, please don't hang up and hear me out. I'm calling to give you an opportunity for a ceasefire agreement with coalition forces in Iraq. This time he listened to me. He's like, who are you? I said, I'm Abu Jamal. I used an alias. I said, I'm with the American embassy. I'm calling you. We would like to negotiate a ceasefire with you and with your forces. He said, no, this will not happen so easy. We need a guarantee from Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Egypt. We'll have talks in a third country. I said, sir, we don't have that time. I'm giving you the word of the strongest nation on earth, the United States of America, and I want to sit personally and talk to you. This time he was repeating what I'm saying. He's like, okay, all right, we will see. He hangs up, we lose him. 3 days later, he gets arrested by U.S. military as he was crossing into Iraq. The military did not know about our outreach to the terrorist leader. They thought they got one of the top 10 guys and they were celebrating. And the CIA immediately put me on a helicopter. I went up to the detention facility, explained it to the military command there. And I said, we reached out to him. And sure enough, they looked at his, he said, yeah, he's telling us that some guy from the green zone called him. His name is Abu Jamal. I said, yes, that's me. That's Abu Jamal. We got him released. We brought him to Baghdad. He sat with US and British military commanders. It was a very simple equation. We said, we do not wish to stay in Iraq forever. We want to leave. You do not want to see all the Sunnis being destroyed and the Shia to destroy whatever is left of you after we leave. So I think this is a great opportunity for you to join the political process in Iraq. The next day, he issued a fatwa, which is a religious edict, to lay down arms against coalition forces. Ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. Since that day, not one bullet was fired against coalition forces. So I think if I'm sitting in Iran, if I'm sitting placed, back to your question, I know it's a long answer, but these are the kinds of tradecraft that we would use. So it's not just about the cloak and dagger Of course, there's a lot of that in a war situation, but you're always looking for a way to diffuse a situation. As a case officer, as a counterterrorism officer, ultimately what you want is to reduce the amount of death. You don't want Americans to die. In this case, we don't want Iranians to die. We know that we have an evil regime, so maybe there is a way that we reach the local indigenous opposition that might be capable. And the leader has to come from within Iran, not somebody installed by the United States. So that would be what I'm focused on.
I'll also add that another very significant piece of intelligence that's not getting talked about as much, but it's open source intelligence, meaning the regime's very own comments and discussions and news that are available through open press. So all of that was married up to put together an intelligence package, an intelligence assessment that allowed for the policymakers to determine that they had a high confidence that now was the time to conduct this operation.
When you're recruiting, what are the things that the CIA look for? Are they looking for, if you're charismatic, are you close with maybe the leadership of the opposing country?
Usually recruiting is an intensely personal activity, right? You have a case officer. I was a case officer, right? I'm not an agent. Agents are the people that case officers recruit, right? These are the foreign nationals. It's a very personal endeavor where you make contact. You probably have studied that person before, so you get a good idea of what motivates them, right? You're looking for, how can I convince this person to not see me as a threat, but to see me as an ally, and to eventually, work for me at my behest, and probably at the betrayal of their own country, right? It's a very personal, very close operation. In wartime, things happen to move much faster, so the recruitment process can also be sped up. It can be much less personal. It can be much more objective focused. For instance, the agency could find out that there's a senior official in the IRGC who maybe isn't going along with the game plan of the government, and reaches out through an intermediary and says, hey, I want to talk to the CIA, or I want to talk to Mossad, and I want to offer my services, in which case there are still a lot of counterintelligence issues that need to be resolved, but you can speed up the recruitment process and do things a lot quicker.
And how likely is it that one of those people will turn into double agents?
So, a lot more likely than people might like to think. Yes, I mean, over the years, the CIA has been more famous for when the Iranians have uncovered CIA agent networks and exposed them, right, and sent people to the gallows, right? Espionage is a game that's played for keeps in police states like Iran. But what people tend to forget is that this has happened more than once. And that means that people are still being recruited, in spite of the fact that, failure could mean the death of the agent. People still step up and are recruited and provide intelligence. And it's no different today. People will be looking at the conflict and they'll be choosing sides. And the CIA, Mossad, and other agencies will be there to help them with that decision and to work with them.
What usually motivates these agents to turn on their country? Is it money? Is it religion? Is it some kind of personal vendetta?
So, Jakson, that's it. Like any multiple choice quiz, there's always the option of D, all of the above, right? And so it's a very personal experience. So it varies with the person, or as we say, the target, right? It varies with the person. And in some people, it's ego. You might have someone who, let's say they're a colonel in the IRGC, and in their mind, they think they should be a general. And so they say, well, I'll show these guys, I'll work for the Americans, and I'll show them who the real smart guy is. Or it could be money, or it could be medical care. We've recruited people who could not get adequate medical care for their close family relatives, and they've reached out and said, I've got access to information, and I'm willing to trade it for medical care for one of my relatives, right? So there's different motivation there. But of course, what trumps everything here is access. You need people who have access to the information you're seeking. Maybe it's an IT systems person who can get you into a closed network of IRGC computers. Or maybe it's someone who can get you into the air defense network of that country in the Air Force. Or maybe it's someone who empties a trash can outside a nuclear facility where the scientists sloppily throw classified documents in the trash. You never know. It depends on the person.
CNN recently reported that the CIA is potentially arming the Kurdish forces as part of their broader Iran strategy. What does this mean for Iran What does it mean for us in the US, and what is the incentive for the Kurdish forces?
Look, I think it's a really bad idea for us to be that involved in the ground movements, whether it's Kurdish or other people. It's one thing to provide support for the Iranians to do this, but the Kurds in Iran are not a majority. They're not going to be accepted or by the opposition. You are setting Iran up for another Iraq, which ended up in a civil war. But I think going in and opening a war front, ground front, by using the Kurds, then what happens when they clash with the Iranian people once they reach Tehran? Don't forget that also Turkey will not let that stand. Turkey is going to be very opposed to the Kurds taking a foothold in a country like Iran, right next door to them.
Iran is a large multi-ethnic state, right? 92 million people or so. Persians, Iranian people, the Persians are about 60 some odd percent. Kurds are about 10%. The Azeris are probably the largest minority in the Northwest with about 24%, right? There's Arabs, there's several other small minorities scattered across. So it is not a homogeneous state by any means. And so stirring up one ethnic group has the potential to stir the others up as well. I mean, the idea that maybe they'll all get together and say, hey, let's get together and form a multi-ethnic democratic state, right? Sounds wonderful, but sounds actually very fanciful, right? It'd be great if that would happen, but not likely. More likely scenario is these different ethnic groups see a weakened central state and say, now's our time to earn our long desired freedom from the Persians, right? So there's great danger here in engaging with any of these ethnic groups if we don't understand how they operate and how they exist as a group.
I don't think a lot of people understand how much of the global economy actually relies on hormuz.
Mm-hmm.
So can you give our viewers kind of a background into what hormuz is,
Mm-hmm.
why it's so important, and the challenges that it faces now?
Sure, the Hormuz Strait, which is a geographical feature in off the coast of Iran, between Iran and the Saudi Peninsula and the United Arab Emirates. It's the narrowest part of the ocean there, 80 miles or something like that across, right? And the Iranians, it's a lifeblood for oil tankers that come out of the Gulf, right, with oil headed mostly for Asia and a lot to Europe. Not much goes to the United States from there. So one could cynically say, it's really not our problem, it's theirs, right? But we can't, because it is 20% of global oil shipments. At the same time, with this war, the Iranians have claimed that they're going to close the Straits of Hormuz, right? That they have the military force to close it. My personal feeling is, yeah, they can close it for a short period, but between the military forces of the United States and our allies, I'm willing to put my money on the coalition that they'll reopen the Straits of Hormuz in short order, right? The Iranians are overmatched. I mean, most of their navy's been sent to the bottom of the sea. You had the sinking the other day for the first time since World War II, when a U.S. submarine sank an Iranian naval ship in where they thought they were safe in international waters, which is an absurd concept, right? So between the U.S. Navy, our coalition forces, my guess is we can keep the straits open. Now, the cost will be heavy. Insurance companies will, of course, be charging a premium for any ships that go through there, and I'm sure a lot of companies will not want to take the risk. But I'm willing to bet that the West can keep the Straits of Hormuz open, keep it free of floating sea mines, which are a threat, or from missile attacks, or from small boat attacks.
There is a narrative that in 1953, there was a particular Iranian prime minister who was trying to nationalize their oil industry. We really weren't aligned with that ideology. And so what we did was we installed the Shah. And recently, Axios today has reported that Trump has told them that he wants to play a role in picking Iran's new leader. Do you think we're in a similar position today that we were in 1953?
Absolutely, 100%. We're setting ourselves up for a disaster. This is going to be another situation where we are trying to push a certain leader that we would approve, and no country will ever accept it. As I said, the Iranian people are proud people. No country would accept us installing a king or a shah or a president or a prime minister. It is one thing to assist the Iranian people, and let me be very clear: the Iranian people absolutely deserve our support. And we should stand, beside the Iranian people that have suffered for the last 47 years. But it's one thing to provide support, and it is another thing to choose their leadership for them. So I think the president is ill-advised, and I think it might be bad advisors around him saying that we need to supervise and approve who's the next leader of Iran, because that person is going to immediately be despised, and we're going to see history repeat itself.
No, it's a vastly different situation, right? 1953, with the height of the Cold War there, or I should say, the Cold War was reaching its heights in competition between the Soviet Union and the United States in particular, right? And so Iran was a very important piece on the chessboard. Iran is a less important piece on the chessboard, right? I mean, in terms of threat, it's been a threat to the United States, but more of a nuisance threat. Up until 2 years ago, it was Iran was an existential threat to Israel, but over the last 2 years, the Israelis have, steadily knocked off Iranian proxies in the region, and also with the two small wars we've had between Israel, the United States, and Iran, we've significantly weakened their offensive missile capability. So Iran is no longer a existential threat to Israel, right? So it's a different ball game in those terms. And in comparison with 53, that was mostly to do with political influence and economic influence, right? This war has more to do with replacing a regime that was a nonstop threat to Israel, right? So I think maybe a little hyperbolic overstatement on the part of the president as far as choosing the next leader, but definitely the administration's actions through our military will have a heavy influencing role on who gets selected as the next leader of Iran.
Do you think this is the beginning of World War III?
I don't believe this is the beginning of World War III, but I think we have to be very, very careful from repeating mistakes that we did in Iraq and Afghanistan and getting into a very, very long war. People, our institutional memory is very short in the CIA and even in the Pentagon, unfortunately. Dick Cheney, in the beginning of the war in Iraq, he was asked the same thing. And he said, I have full confidence in the capability of our military. This is going to be just a few weeks and this war is going to be over. 8 years later, thousands of Americans dead, over 20,000 maimed and injured, over 100,000 Iraqis dead. That was a more protracted war in Iraq. And what worries me is I'm hearing the Trump administration's repeating the same rhetoric of this is going to be a few days, maybe a couple of weeks. Short of World War III, I think this is going to entangle America. This is going to activate sleeper cells in America and across the world for retaliatory attacks. That worries me more. The asymmetrical warfare is what worries me more than a conventional war with us and Russia and China.
Russia, I've heard Putin is described in this conflict as a friend without benefits, right? The Russians haven't really gotten involved. The Chinese haven't gotten involved, right? The Iranians are desperately trying to expand the conflict, right? They're trying to spread the pain, firing a missile at Turkey, firing drones at Azerbaijan, right? So they're looking to globalize the conflict, but this is only going to backfire on them. And that there's just no reason for this to blossom into any kind of world war scenario because, the different countries just aren't aligning up in some sort of military march to war, right? So, no, I do not see any chance for World War III here.
The fact that the Gulf and Arab nation partners have stepped up to the degree by which they have is very telling. And I think, again, a miscalculation by the Iranians.
You've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Goff. I really appreciate it.
Jakson, thanks for the great questions.
I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Joseph, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. If you see behind me, that's actually books that my wife has written. She was also CIA. She got permission to write these books. The first book is called Breaking Cover, My Secret Life in the CIA and what it taught me about what's worth fighting for. And it has a lot of great answers about people wanting to know, how do you get into the CIA? What is it like? And what is it like to operate even as a woman? When my wife, who also operated in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and some of these places as a CIA officer. Her second book, the Get Off the X, It's taken from our ambush training. We get training about if you are attacked by terrorists overseas, the site of the attack is considered the X. And you're trained about how to get out of the X, away from where the attack takes place. Her books takes that concept from the CIA, applies it to real life, whether people are stuck in a relationship or a bad job or whatever it is in life. But it's supposed to use CIA techniques to help you to get unstuck in life.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear about. Thanks so much again, Joseph.
Thank you.